Now see that, son? $1 saved is $1 earned.
And I saved a ton of dollars by switching to NJM Insurance.
Switch to NJM, and you could save an average of $702 a year on your auto insurance.
Hello, everyone. You are tuned in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, presented by NJM Insurance. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, everyone. Today we are coming to you live from the press box at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, where in just a little bit, the Philadelphia Eagles will play the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 57. I'm Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino. And today I am joined by my fellow beat reporters Jeff McLane and EJ Smith, along with our sports columnists Marcus Hayes and Mike Sielski. Guys, we've made it to the final game of the year, the biggest game of the year. How is everyone feeling?
Let me start things off. I'm feeling great. I feel like I'm watching an old episode of Daily News Live looking at all these faces, man. I mean, it is something. So thank you all for joining us on behalf of Josh and me. You know, we tried to carry this thing so that you guys could get here. And, how are you guys feeling?
I'm excited to get this thing going. I feel like I've been in downtown Phoenix for a month, and I'm raring to go.
Are we go down the line here? I guess, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's get this thing going.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm having a little bit of deja vu. This is the same seat that I was sitting in almost, where I saw Pete Carrill sabotage the rest of his season by not giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch 4 times in a row at the goal line. They threw an interception against Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and gifted them a Super Bowl. So a little bit of deja vu, but certainly a lot of excitement.
Jeff, how's it going? Throughout the season, we have been coming to you live before every game to tell you the latest Eagles news. Today, we have supersized our panel of Inquirer experts in order to bring you the best pregame show for the biggest game of the season. EJ, can you give a quick reminder to all of our viewers where is the best place that they can continue the conversation?
Yeah, Josh, Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day is where we can have a two-way conversation with you guys. We're going to put our analysis in there throughout the game. We want you to do the same, whatever you might mention or whatever you might, notice on the broadcast. It'll be, again, like I said, a two-way conversation with our analysis and your analysis. Usually we would have, we'd use some of your questions for the following week, but obviously this is the final week of the season. So, make sure to head over there and, again, have that two-way conversation.
All right, guys, let's just dive right into it. It's a jam-packed show. We're here at Super Bowl 57. Mike, I'm going to throw this one to you. You were there with us in training camp, the dog days of summer, as they like to say. Did you expect these Eagles to be at this point? Again, Super Bowl 57, here we are. They're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs.
Not in training camp, Josh. I didn't expect it. And I think a lot of people looked at this team that way because at that time we were kind of unsure about Jalen Hurts and what kind of quarterback he would be. There was clearly a sense that the Eagles had improved in the offseason, that they had added talent, they had added depth, and it wasn't – you didn't have to be a genius to say, well, they'll be as good as Jalen Hurts is. And the fact that Hurts has developed as he has, that he became an MVP candidate, that he's become kind of the nucleus, the nexus of their entire offense, that he's become so respected as a leader, goes a long way to explaining how they got here. I think once you saw how good they were a few weeks in, then it became easier and more natural to say, hey, this is absolutely a team that can contend for and potentially win a Super Bowl.
Jeff and Marcus, you guys were both at the last Eagles Super Bowl appearance in the winter of 2018. Are there any comparisons that you take from that season to this season in regards to how the year went for the Eagles in roster transactions throughout the year to help get them to this point?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. You still have 7 pieces from that team from 7 years ago. The 4 core guys of Brandon Graham, Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, and Lane Johnson So you certainly have some carryover. But otherwise, the rest of the roster is completely turned over. If there are some similarities, it's that a lot of the new additions that they made this offseason, just like they did in 2017, have almost all contributed to the team's success. Howie Roseman had another fabulous offseason in terms of what he did in free agency, what he did in terms of the draft, and pretty much a lot of the other unsung, maybe little moves that he's made to build this roster. So for me, I would say that is probably the biggest similarity, and that they were able to kind of add pieces in just one off season and all of a sudden become a Super Bowl caliber team.
Marcus, after the NFC championship, you were in the locker room, the Eagles locker room at Lincoln Financial Field, chatting with team owner Jeffrey Lurie. And in his eyes, what was he feeling in that clinching moment? Again, the Eagles have reached the Super Bowl. It's been quite a ride this season.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about when he thought the Eagles were for real, and he really loved. There was I think there was a week between the last preseason game and the first regular season game, Labor Day weekend, and the Eagles front office was pretty confident they could make a run to the Super Bowl. Maybe not to it and through it, but be a contender. Be maybe not the number one overall seed, but that was his goal in that moment. And I talked to Howie Roseman on Medium Night, and one of the things he said, and it's kind of unprovoked, he said that after they won, I think it was Game 2 against Minnesota, he thought personally that they could go as far as health and good luck could take them, which was remarkable because after that Minnesota game, a lot of people, I think some of the people on his panel were like, well, that's a pretty good win, but how good is Minnesota really? Well, Minnesota turned out to be pretty darn good. And if you look at the Green Bay win before they played the Eagles, I think they beat Detroit after they played the Eagles, New Orleans after they played the Eagles. But for me, it wasn't until they beat Jacksonville in Week 4, and I know Jacksonville's kind of a joke franchise, but they had a good season. So 4 weeks in for me, 2 weeks in for Howie. Jeffrey knew it all along.
All right, EJ, I want your thoughts on the season. What has been the biggest driving factor for the Eagles to get to this point?
Well, I think Mike mentioned it with Jalen Hurts. But aside from him, I think that the pass rush, especially, this was a group that ranked 31st in sacks last season. They went out and added Hassan Reddick. They drafted Jordan Davis. And, I think that the strides that you've seen from that group, I think is a big reason, why they're here. And we'll get to it later, not to tease too much here, but, I think it'll be a big factor if they are to win this game as well. If you followed football long enough, it's pretty obvious what the foundational pieces of winning are in this league. It's to have a good quarterback, protect that quarterback, and influence the other team's quarterback. So, I think that aside from Jalen Hurts and the obvious strides that he's made, I think that this defensive front, the ability to generate pressure, the ability to wreck games. I think that was something I didn't necessarily see going into the season. I didn't predict that they'd be, on the track to break the 84 Bears sack record, but, we saw them do that. And I think it's a big reason why they've had success.
Hassan Reddick has been such a key piece for this Eagles defense. EJ, let's keep it right here with you as we transition into who's hurt and who's healthy. Starting with the quarterbacks, both of them had lingering issues at the end of the season into the playoffs. What's the temperature check here on Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, the NFL MVP here, as we head into Super Bowl 57?
Yeah, I think we'll have a sense of how healthy they are pretty quickly in this game. The indications are always going to be positive with these types of things. It sounds like Patrick Mahomes had a really good week in practice. A couple of weeks ago, there were reports that he, maybe was a little bit more hindered, with that ankle injury. I think he looked obviously looked, bothered by it, but it seemed like as the game progressed, it bothered him more. I think that, he's got 2 more weeks to get healthy on that ankle. And even when he's not 100%, Patrick Mahomes is a special talent, obviously a guy who can make things happen even when he's not at full speed. And then with Jalen Hurts, I think he's been clear this whole time. The right shoulder is something he's dealing with. He didn't have his best game against San Francisco 49ers, whether that's because the 49ers defense is really good or whether you think that's because his shoulder was affected. He hasn't been exactly the same passer on deep balls, especially since the shoulder injury. And I think, again, that's something that we're going to have to just keep an eye on early in the game. I think we'll have an indication. I think the Eagles are going to have to take their deep shots in this game. We'll see how that shoulder is impacted by that.
Jalen Hurts, such a huge piece, obviously, for this Eagles offense. But he isn't the only one dealing with injuries. Lane Johnson, towards the end of the season, he missed a couple games with a torn tendon in his groin. Jeff, you actually spent some time with Lane in the middle of this playoff run. What were your observations in regards to how he is dealing with this injury, which is going to require off-season surgery when the season ends?
Excuse me, I unmuted myself. Sorry. Lane Johnson, I think he said it this week and he said it last week, even when I hung out with him at his bro barn in Morristown, that he felt better in the 49ers game than he did in the Giants game, and expected, with the week off, that he should be able to go full strength, not full strength, but pretty much close to full strength for this game. Certainly, as you mentioned, the surgery is going to happen at some point, but there's really not much more in terms of how, making it worse that he can do to the torn groin at this point. And now I think we'll see the same Lane that we've seen since he's been back and since we've seen all season, the guy who hasn't allowed a sack in 30 games.
Lane Johnson, such a crucial piece there over on the right side of the offensive line. An all-pro season for Lane Johnson. Still dealing with that injury. We'll see how he looks today, but over the course of the playoffs, he has been playing at that elite level that many fans have come to know with Lane Johnson. Mike, special teams has been an up and down point for this team throughout the season. We look how strong the defense has been. We look how strong or explosive the offense has been. Special teams a bit shaky, and there have been a couple of injuries that popped up here over the past few weeks. Britton Covey, he popped up on the injury report this week with a hamstring, but it looks like punter Aaron Sipos is going to be back today. They're also their featured holder in the special teams kicking unit. Mike, what's your temperature check there in special teams land as Aaron Sipos makes his return today?
Well, you'd hate to have the Super Bowl come down to the punter and whether he's healthy or not, Josh. But it is something that's important. I mean, look, in a perfect scenario for the Eagles, they won't have to worry about whether Aaron Sipos is healthy because they won't be punting the ball at all. They'll be scoring on every possession. Now, that's unrealistic to think that's going to happen. I do think it helps them quite a bit that Sipos is back. He's been far better this season than Brett Kern. Kern had shanked several punts in the last few weeks. Wasn't really kicking the ball all that deep. The Covey injury is an interesting one to me because he's been relatively sure-handed back there. And there have been times later in the season where he's delivered, a relatively good return here and there. And it's going to be an interesting dynamic in this game, I think, because special teams is one of those things that can be unpredictable in a playoff game and can change the course of a particular individual game. It's not something you think about all that often. So it's something that I'll keep an eye on because, honestly, Josh, I wrote before the season, before anyone really knew who Britton Covey was and what he was capable of, that maybe the Eagles would be better off going without a punt returner because they didn't seem to have anyone on their roster to fit the bill. And now, all these weeks later, they have a punt returner, but he's not fully healthy. So I think it's something that fans ought to keep an eye on today.
Guys, let's transition over to our favorite segment. EJ pointed out earlier, it is called What You Said, a reminder that you can submit your comments and questions throughout the game at inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, and we'll have a chance to have a back and forth with you as we continue to watch this final game of the season, the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. Marcus, or really everyone, we've all produced some stellar work throughout the week. A lot of good features here from Phoenix, Arizona, getting ready for the Super Bowl. Marcus, you wrote about Brandon Graham wanting to strip sack Patrick Mahomes like he did Tom Brady in the Eagles' last Super Bowl appearance. That was really the exclamation point of that game. I'm going to read a comment from that story. Here now, it comes from Philly Sixers fan who says, Mahomes is the best quarterback by far that the Eagles will have faced this postseason, and Andy Reid might be the best coach they've faced this year. This year, the teams that they have faced the 49ers are 0-15 in games after facing them. Eagles may have to play their best game. Marcus, can you recap exactly your conversation with Brandon Graham and how he can make an impact today? Again, the Eagles with 4 pass rushers exceeding double-digit sacks.
That was really a watershed moment for Brandon Graham in his career. a lot of people forget that his rookie season wasn't great. I believe he was injured his second season, had some coaching and defensive coordinator in and out transitions. It was hard for him to sort of get his footing, and he'd been a very good player for several years before 2017, and then 2017 sort of coalesced into him being an elite pass rusher with lots of support, lots of depth. Chris Long on the other side. Derek Barnett had a good year. Fletcher Cox maybe had his best year, maybe not statistically, but all around. And that put Brandon Graham in a situation late in the game, and I believe he lined up inside as kind of a defensive tackle, beat his man, got to Brady, stripped the ball, popped up in Derek Barnett's hand. And he gets emotional when he talks about that. He talks about that as being like the beginning of the second chapter of his career. He knew that he was going to be in the league for several more years, but that kind of opened people's eyes up to him. Pro Bowls followed. He got double-digit sacks this year. It's and if you've been around Brandon Graham, I think our listeners understand that Brandon Graham is very authentic. He's committed. He loves to play football, and he loves Philadelphia. So it was fun talking to him over the last couple of weeks, but especially I think that was a Wednesday conversation about the finest moment of his career at a Super Bowl at the end of it to help seal a win for a town that, like Brandon Graham, seems to always be the underdog, always, sort of scrapping and fighting for whatever it can get. It was an interesting conversation, and there's probably no player I'm happier for than Brandon Graham this week.
BG, he makes his successful return from a torn Achilles injury last year, ended his season very, very early, and here he goes. He's part of that vicious defense, vaunted defense, chasing after the quarterback. We'll see if he's able to get after Patrick Mahomes today. Mike, I want to go to you. Before we arrived in Arizona, you took a trip up north to find a little bit more about Jeff Stoutland. Here, this comment comes from A Bruce 254, who says, Mike, you really buried the lead. Stoutland contract extension, heck yeah. Mike, could you just detail parts of that story? Again, a magnificent piece here before we got to Arizona on Jeff Stoutland.
Well, thanks, Josh. Yeah, I took a drive up to Staten Island the Thursday before we all left to come out here for the Super Bowl because I wanted to get a better sense of where Jeff Stoutland had come from. We hear a lot from the Eagles offensive linemen and from other members of the organization and from people around the NFL about what a terrific offensive line coach Stoutland is. Jordan Mailata, before a Monday night game, referred to himself as coming from Jeff Stoutland University. And it's rare that an offensive line coach becomes kind of a cult hero to a fan base of an NFL team. And Stoutland's certainly done that. And I went up to Port Richmond High School on Staten Island and tracked down somebody who lived on his block when he was growing up. I talked to his old college roommate. I talked to Kevin Gilbride, who has been a fixture in the NFL for a long time as a head coach and an offensive coordinator, and was Stoutland's first head coach in college at Southern Connecticut State, recruited him. And to a man, what they all talked about was the intelligence and devotion to football that Stoutland had. And one of the interesting aspects of his background is that he was mostly a defensive player when he was in high school and college, usually a linebacker, sometimes a defensive end. And even to this day, I think that background informs how he coaches the members of the Eagles offensive line. He told me that the first thing he does with them is teach them and instruct them on what the defense is going to do to try to shed their blocks or get around them. And only by understanding what the defense is going to do can those offensive linemen block and use angles and do all the things they need to do to protect Jalen Hurts or run block for Miles Sanders. So it was really an interesting journey to kind of get to the bottom of just Jeff Stoutland as a person and a coach.
Jeff Stoutland University here with the Eagles, but it started over there in Staten Island. You can check Mike's story out at Inquirer.com/Eagles. We're keeping it here on the offensive line. Jeff, in the week for our special section, you wrote on Jason Kelce and his brand. This comment comes from Watson MR, who says, looking at how Jason Kelce has progressed both professionally and personally in this city, from an undersized for his position 6th round pick to a potential Hall of Famer, this is an amazing story. Jeff, and you've really chronicled Jason Kelce throughout his career, but for this specific story, what did you learn about Jason and his off-field endeavors?
Well, I think everybody knows how successful the podcast he's done with his brother Travis has been, and those around Philadelphia know that Jason pretty much kind of made himself a part of city folklore ever since that parade speech he gave after the 2017 Super Bowl, the underdog speech. And actually, in fact, underdogs has become the brand name of apparel that he is now selling as part of his foundation, the benefits of which go to Philadelphia city students and children. And that's obviously all part of Jason's kind of brand, giving back to the community, but also being very judicious in terms of how he uses his brand. Jason, there, as you know, Marcus used the word authentic earlier when talking, about Brandon Graham, and I think that applies to Jason Kelsey as well. And Jason's a very principled person, and I think that resonates with Philadelphians and has increasingly so over these last several years. And in terms of his performance on the field, I mean, I think at this point, when you've won 5 All-Pros, first-team All-Pros again this year, doing so, he's pretty much cemented his place in Canton, and when he retires, will be in the Hall of Fame. The question, of course, is will he retire? My sense, talked to his mother, Donna, this week. I wasn't the only one who spoke to Donna this week, but she seems to think that Jason's not going to retire. He's having the most fun of his career. And in fact, I think he may be playing as well he has ever in his entire career, which is really unparalleled for most football players. Typically, it's in the middle of their careers, not at the end of their careers. And that's the way Jason Kelsey has played here this year and certainly the last 5 years.
Jason Kelsey, a 5-time All-Pro. You can Jeff's story in our special section, also at Inquirer.com/Eagles. What else you can find there is EJ's story on Jalen Hurts, a triple threat quarterback, as he likes to say. This comment comes from Bob Wiley, who says 60-40 run pass is the key to winning. EJ, whatever the percentages may be in regards to the Eagles winning, Jalen Hurts, such a huge piece, an MVP caliber season, finished second in MVP voting behind Patrick Mahomes. What have you discovered as we kind of chronicled Jalen's career?
Yeah, well, when I was looking through the stats, there's a very limited number of dual threat quarterbacks that have made it to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. And if you really look at Jalen's contributions to the run game, there's really only a few examples of people or players who have that level of, workload in the run game. And we talked a lot earlier this season about Jalen being +1 in the run game and, kind of evening out the numbers. Quarterbacks that have his playing style are pretty rare cases in the Super Bowl. So, I really did. I wanted to dive into, the fact that he's kind of disproving a notion that it's harder to win that way. You can't make it to a Super Bowl with a quote-unquote running quarterback. And the way that he's done that is really by expanding his game. You mentioned it, the triple threat, phrase that he's coined. He's worked hard to become more accurate and to become a better processor, someone who can diagnose defenses and put the ball where it needs to be. Now, in addition to that, he's never run away from being a running quarterback, no pun intended there. Like he's always embraced that part of his game. And, that's progress for a league that has long, talked about, pocket quarterbacks are the conventional way that you have to play. Predominantly black quarterbacks, a lot of them are dual threat quarterbacks. There's been a stigma around it. So, for him to be able to kind of embrace that part of his game, I think it speaks to, some of the guys that I talked to in the story, like Mike Vick, kind of paving that way for him. So, yeah, I tried to dive into all that. If the Eagles win the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts will be the first quarterback to surpass 100 carries that would win a championship. So I do think that it's kind of a little bit of a trend story for the league, and it speaks to the work that Jalen's done as a passer.
You can find all of those features at Inquirer.com/Eagles. As for myself, for our special section, the Saturday before the Eagles left for Arizona, I visited Avonte Maddox with Dallas Goedert the night before they flew here, and really just got to see what was going on inside their heads as they prepared for what is the biggest game of their life. This comment comes from Not Exactly, who says, "Not sure what was said about the 2018 draft class at the time, but looking back, it was pretty good. 3 starters with Goddard, Maddox, or 4 starters with Goddard, Maddox, Sweat, and Mailata." And speaking with Avonte Maddox and Dallas Goedert, this is they're manifesting. They're so close to manifesting what they wanted to accomplish in 2018. Even EJ and our colleague Olivia Reiner spoke to Josh Sweat earlier in the week. They said that when they got to town that 2018 spring, they'd be in the city, they'd be at a Reading Terminal Market, and fans would be stopping them saying, congratulations on the Super Bowl. Not exactly knowing that they weren't part of that Super Bowl winning team. Here they have an opportunity to advance the team to their second Super Bowl victory against such a stellar draft class there with Dallas Goedert, Avonte Maddox, Josh Sweat, and Jordan Mailata, Stoutland University there for Mike Sielski. Guys, it's prediction time. Before we get to score predictions, I want one player to watch out for. Let's go around the clock, starting with Mike. Who are you watching today on the field?
I'm watching Lane Johnson as usual, and kind of, if you can call the Eagles' offensive line one player, I would keep an eye on them. They're the engine that makes this team go. And again, not to tease out our predictions too much, but I have a very hard time seeing the Chiefs stopping the Eagles on offense if the Eagles' offensive line has even an average game.
Lane Johnson, the offensive line. EJ, who is your player to watch out for?
Well, longtime watchers of the show will know that sometimes Josh likes to sneak in and take the one that I had in mind or take the obvious one. So I'm going to leave some of the more obvious players, I know I won't even name him, but give me A.J. Brown. He's obviously a little obvious, but, I put in my prediction for the paper that, A.J. Brown's kind of like my sneaky, Super Bowl MVP pick. Receivers have a little bit of history of winning that award. As Mike said, I think that if the Eagles offensive line can hold up, I think they've got matchup advantages on the outside, whether it's A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Obviously Dallas Goedert's going to command a lot of attention too. I think AJ's kind of been waiting for that big playoff performance. I think they're going to need to score points tonight. And I think that, AJ Brown could be in for a big game. So yeah, give me him.
EJ goes to the number one wide receiver here for the Eagles, AJ Brown. Jeff, who are you watching out today for? Who's your player to watch out today in Super Bowl 57?
I'm going to go on the defensive side. I'm going to go with Hassan Reddick, who's been playing great football all season, but really, these last few games in the postseason made a huge difference. That strip sack that he had of Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship essentially was the biggest play of the game, and will forever be remembered by Philadelphia Eagles fans. And he's got a pretty good favorable matchup, I think, for him against Andrew Wiley, the right tackle for Chiefs. That's the weak link on that line, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Eagles dial up certain types of rushes to attack him, not just with Hassan going straight at him, but kind of do something to confuse him. If the Eagles win and Hassan Reddick has a prominent role, or just even if they win, from what I understand, he probably would be only the third Philadelphian. I know he's not from Philadelphia, but to play for a Philadelphia team or to be born in Philadelphia, to have a significant role on a championship caliber team. The other two being Chuck Bednarik, who went to Penn, and Will Chamberlain, who grew up in Philadelphia and won championship for the 76ers.
Jeff goes with Hassan Reddick. When Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, has been sending for, the Eagles have certainly proved they're still capable of applying pressure. We'll see if Hassan Reddick is able to get there in the backfield with Patrick Mahomes today. Marcus, man of the hour, who are you watching out for today?
I got to say, the guy that I think they missed the most through injury was C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He's a playmaker. He's in a contract year. He's motivated. He's a spectacular athlete. I believe that 50 of the 70 regular season sacks were coverage sacks. That's not to take anything away from Brandon Graham or Hassan Reddick, but they got a lot of their sacks because that quarterback had to pull the ball back down because C.J. Gardner-Johnson, as well as James Bradbury and Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox and, even Marcus Epps, they were in the right spot. But teams were scared to throw where C.J. Gardner-Johnson was. We're seeing something happen here with a converted quarterback to safety, the way you saw happen the second, third, fourth year of Brian Dawkins' career. If they don't bring C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, I'm not sure they get back to the Super Bowl, and he could help them win this one here tonight.
Marcus goes with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, the NFL's interception leader, despite missing 5 games late in the season. To recap, Mike Sielski goes Lane Johnson. EJ goes, you were Hassan Reddick, EJ? Oh, AJ Brown. Jeff goes.
Nobody mentioned Jalen Hurts. I thought that was the obvious one that I was saving for somebody, and we all just kind of passed over him. Yeah.
We're all trying to outsmart each other, I think.
Yeah, I think that's it. We're too deferential on this show.
I take Jalen Hurts. I changed my pick.
We have to leave an easy one for Josh.
I'll take Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith. EJ went with AJ Brown. Devontae, he's played under the brightest lights. It was another special section story I wrote this week. I was a freshman at Alabama. He had that walk-off touchdown in the national championship game. As a senior at Alabama, he had 12 catches, 200 receiving yards, all in the first half. So Devontae Smith definitely has that big game experience. It's score prediction time, though, guys. Let's go around the clock again. Mike, are you taking the Eagles or Chiefs, and what is your score?
I'm taking the Eagles. I took them in a column I wrote that ran a week before this game. I think they've been the best team in the NFL all season. I think man for man, while the Chiefs, certainly have probably the best quarterback in the NFL, the best tight end in the NFL, and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I think man for man, the Eagles are better. They're more talented. They're deeper. They're better along the offensive and defensive lines. I think the Eagles win 38-24.
Mike takes the Eagles. EJ, what was your prediction in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer?
So I flip-flopped a lot. I think this is going to be I think this will be a close game. I think that, I said this, if these two teams played 10 times, I think it might be 5-5, maybe 6-4, maybe 6-4 Eagles if I had to choose. So I went Eagles in a close game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. These two teams, they're not evenly matched in a traditional way. They have, obviously the Eagles have a lot of matchup advantages that they would be able to take advantage of. But at the same time, the Chiefs have the best quarterback in the league. And they've got one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL, if not the best. So I think that, I really do think that kind of evens out the scales. So, I think both offenses will be able to score pretty regularly. I think there might be a feeling out process early in the game, kind of both coaching staffs trying to figure out what the other side is doing. But I think I had the Eagles, maybe it was 38, Chiefs 34, something like that.
EJ, you point out to the coaching staffs. Jeff, you spent some time speaking with Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo during media day. What is your score prediction?
Yeah, I mean, like everybody else here, actually, Mike, you actually pitched the blowout. But as EJ said, I see a coin flip of a game. I think it's going to be one of these games that they ping pong back and forth. Who has the lead here and there? It's just going to take time. It's going to take a turn where each team with the ball is going to score some points, because I do like EJ see points being scored in this game. If the Eagles come out and they get a double-digit lead, then I think it's going to be over for the Chiefs. The Eagles, when they play from behind, they're probably the best team in the NFL doing so. They could run the ball behind that vicious offensive line, and I just don't think that plays into the strengths of Andy Reid as a play caller. He'll start dropping Patrick Mahomes on every play. That being said, I think the Chiefs are going to find a way to get this game into the fourth quarter. And then if you get the game into the fourth quarter, then that's where Patrick Mahomes takes over, and that's where having the better quarterback, and I'm not taking anything away from Jalen Hurts. He's had a phenomenal season. He is a rising quarterback. He's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. But I think Patrick Mahomes is a level above him and everybody else in this league. And if they can keep it within one score, he will find a way to win this game. So I'm going with the Chiefs 31-30 on a late game field goal or touchdown.
Jeff goes with the Chiefs in a squeaker. Marcus, what is your prediction here for Super Bowl 57?
Yeah, I'm with Mike. The team with the best offensive and defensive lines almost always wins unless the quarterback can overcome them. If that were true down the line, Aaron Rodgers would have 7 Super Bowls right now. This is a pretty big difference in the trenches, and the Eagles have a huge advantage. I also, I've covered Andy Reid for 24 years now. He's not great in big games. He's just not. For those two reasons, I see the Eagles sort of walking away with it early, maybe 33-25 at the end. And, hopefully we can all file our stories by halftime and get to be ready to go to those post-Super Bowl, post-game parties.
Early files, your mouth to God's ears, Marcus.
No overtime, I think, is the general agreement here. As for me, I think I took the Eagles by 6 points or so, less than a touchdown. Not that decisive of a victory as Mike Sielski predicts, but I do think the Eagles squeak out in this one. Guys, any final thoughts here before we wrap up and cover this Super Bowl matchup between the Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs?
I will say.
Oh, go ahead, Marcus.
I'm sorry. I will say it's just been what a bonus, really, since Villanova went to the Final Four last year. Philadelphia has had that experience, the bittersweet departure of Jay Wright, the Phillies and the Union making simultaneous championship runs, and then an Eagles team that everybody kind of thought would be kind of a 10 or 11 win team, maybe win a playoff game, taking Philadelphia to Arizona for a fifth Super Bowl or second Super Bowl in 5 years. It's just it's been a fun run. It's been a nice time to be a sports writer and a sports fan in Philadelphia, and I would encourage everyone to enjoy the evening no matter what the outcome, because frankly, those two teams, especially the Eagles and the Phillies, they could make this a sort of an annual thing. They should be contenders for a while.
Marcus points out all Philadelphia teams advancing to the championships. Last night, actually, I caught up with Dave Edelman, partial Sixers owner. He says the Sixers got to keep it up. Joel Embiid, they're up next. Jeff, final thoughts for today's game.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Marcus mentioning Andy Reid, and I covered Andy since 2009, and I agree. I mean, certainly in big spots, as the Eagles fans know very well, Andy has been known to not, coach some of his best football. If you look at him off bye weeks, he's 28-4, which is an astounding record. In fact, I wrote about this just this weekend about how Nick Sirianni called Andy before his first bye week and kind of wanted to get some sort of advice on how to handle that week. And Nick since then is 3-0 himself. But what I should point out about Andy is that of the 4 losses, 2 have come in the Super Bowl. So that seems to tip the scales a little bit more in the favor of the Eagles. There was a report before this game, I also want to mention, from Jay Glazer at Fox. He spoke to Andy Reid, who mentioned that he has a decision to make. I'm not getting any younger. I'm paraphrasing here, which suggests that maybe Andy will retire after this game. I find it kind of curious that he would even mention this or allow it to be mentioned. That's not Andy Reid's way. Maybe he's looking for a little more extra motivation for his players if this is, in fact, his last game.
Mike, you also spent some time covering Andy Reid. Any final thoughts today before Nick Sirianni, Andy Reid square off in Super Bowl 57?
Josh, I think what strikes me about this game and this Eagles season as a whole is how different in some ways it is from the run that they went on in 17 and 18, and from the posture that most Philadelphia teams and fans, kind of the relationships that they have. The Eagles have been so good for so long this season. And we're so dominant in their 2 playoff wins over the Giants and the 49ers that the idea of them being underdogs to the Chiefs isn't as prevalent and isn't as strong as usually is. Most Philadelphia sports fans, I think, like a situation where they feel like they have nothing to lose, right? The Phillies went on this, as Marcus mentioned, this incredible run throughout October and then got to the World Series and lost to a team that was regarded to be better than they were, the Houston Astros. And I think that took a little bit of the sting out of that loss for a lot of Phillies fans. And I wonder if the same dynamic is in place here, not just because of the fact that the Eagles have been so good all year and it got to a point where people were kind of like, yeah, they're going to get to the Super Bowl. Everybody can see it. The one dynamic that hasn't been mentioned much this week that is really interesting to me, I wonder how fans would have reacted if Andy Reid had not already had a Super Bowl victory and were coaching in this game. Because I could see a lot of people going, geez, the guy was with us for 14 years and couldn't win the big one, and now he's going to get the first one against our team. And I wonder if that's kind of contributed a little bit to just the tiny tamp-down atmosphere I feel. Not that Eagles fans aren't excited, it's just that it's a little bit different from 2018.
A little bit different from 2018, Andy Reid with that Super Bowl championship. Jeff pointing to some clouds hovering over Andy Reid's future. EJ, you have been with me all season on this show, Gameday Central. What are your final thoughts here today before the Eagles take on the Chiefs?
Oh, Josh, you're going to make me emotional. This show has been, a great part of, our weekly coverage. And I want to first start off by thanking you guys for joining us. And then also thank all of the people who watch at home. We wouldn't do the show without you. We appreciate all of you that comment and, like I said, follow along at home and have made us a part of your game day schedule. So thank you to you guys. I hope you all enjoy the game. I've been trying to sneak some peeks at the pregame, warm-ups to give you some insight. I know that's probably what a lot of you guys are here for. So, I don't have a whole lot for you because I'm so locked in on the show. But I saw, it seems like the team is like keeping it a little loose. I've seen some guys dancing. And a quick injury update is that Britton Covey, he's going through routes. He looks fine. He doesn't look too hindered by the hamstring. So, again, I just want to say thanks to the audience. Thanks to Josh for hosting. And thank you guys for joining us.
All right, guys, it is time to wrap up. Jalen Hurts is on the field now. We see him there throwing to the receivers. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to Inquire Live at Gameday Central, presented by NJM Insurance. Make sure you stick around at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day to follow along with us as the Eagles compete here in Super Bowl 57. Thanks so much to our fellow Inquirer reporters and columnists joining us for this special show. And thank you so much to our audience for tuning in all season to Game Day Central. Happy Super Bowl Sunday to all.